Well, what happens when the market doesn't do the heavy lifting and you've been left over leveraged and these promised rental returns aren't necessarily forthcoming? The Treasury undercooked the amount of SMSF loans that were going out. They said that there were 4,000, but there were 16,000 in the last financial year. If there were 16,000 in the last financial year, how many thousands do you think happened in the last 8 weeks?
You've got this reoccurring revenue from your rent roll, but you have people in there, as you say, you've got your tenants in there that can be converted into buyers. You've got owners that will buy more property, but you've also got customers on both sides.
I've dropped rent on 2 places. You had an artificial surge of demand in the market, which now, as of 7-8 days ago, just doesn't exist anymore.
You're listening to the Property Management Excellence Podcast for insights that drive rapid rental growth.
Welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Great to have you with us. Alex Whitlock with you. PMX Podcast. I'm co-founder and managed director of REB, but I've got some important guests with me today. Not mere amateurs like myself. I've got some people who've got their fingers on the pulse of what's happening, both in the, I guess, in agency land, but also out there in the broader market. Really pleased to welcome back to the podcast Liam, who is the managing editor of our property portfolio, and also Emilie, who is the deputy editor. These guys are very connected across the whole real estate ecosystem. This isn't just what's happening in property management and in sales, and very much topical at the moment, the buyer's agent sector, but really across, the impact that everything has on investors and buyers, and to a certain degree, tenants. It's never been more tumultuous in my memory of running REB since we launched it in 2008. There's more going on now than I can ever remember before.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting introduction because now we actually have to deliver, Emilie. We've actually got to bring the expertise. But I mean, you're right. There's never been a more tumultuous time. Obviously, tax changes as well. But on the PM landlord side, what we're hearing from so many people right across Australia is that the job of a property manager is getting harder. Why is it getting harder? Because investors need to protect their returns somehow. And if you're looking down the barrel of May 12 and the changes that have been made to the tax regime in Australia, there's a lack of investor confidence because, well, where's it going to stop? Where's it going to stop? As a result of this, we're expecting, listings, clearance rates are falling. The house prices are falling. We're expecting that there could be, a $6-7 billion slump in stamp duty revenue. The government's going to have to claw back money from somewhere.
And land tax as well.
Land taxes that have been adding on. So there's a lack, and this just doesn't hit property investors, it hits all investors. Keep in mind, they went after equities as well. There's a big general malaise, but what that means for the property manager, the so what for the property manager, we hear it from everyone, that their job's getting harder because people are getting really nervous.
People are getting stressed as well.
They're getting stressed. They're leaning on them. They're counting pennies in a way which previously they wouldn't have. And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm not here to cast judgment on that. But what it means is that their willingness to do upgrades their willingness to work with a property manager as a trusted advisor has also been strained as well, which is very disappointing.
Well, I want to talk about something which is kind of a bit left of field, but is very topical at the moment. And look, the advantage of having you guys on is, we can give insights into areas outside of traditional sort of realms of property management. Something my WhatsApp has been buzzing 24 hours a day on our real estate chat around what's happening in the buyer's agent sector. And we're not going to mention any names, but there are breaking stories emerging now following the big dash dot story, which you guys were all over really early. And it's not just a big story because it's topical in real estate. It's a big story because Australians lost their money. There's another breaking story. We're not going to go into that now because we haven't got everything confirmed, but it's looking like there are going to be others that fall by the wayside. Now, this is important because you have buyer's agents that have put landlords, property owners, investors into the market. Where do they end up with? Well, we know that 73% of them end up with a property manager. A lot of them have had a hospital pass because you've got a person who's bought a property that isn't perhaps quite what it's been cracked up to be. With environmental changes now, maybe there's pressure on the valuation of that property, maybe they're highly leveraged. So there's a lot of relevance around what's happening at that area of the marketplace. Emilie, you've got your finger on the pulse. What's your take on what's going on at the moment in the BA landscape?
I think the BA landscape is going through a drastic change at the moment. I think even with the end of SMSF, I think the BAs that focused on one particular segment will have issues, like adapt to what the market is at the moment. So you need to go back to have the fundamentals. You need to make sure that the asset you're offering to your client is the right asset. And I think some of them used to transact a lot, and some of them used to have people come at them. I think now it's like for real estate agents, you need to go and prospect. You need to put the work behind it. You need to really make sure that you're spending your money the way it should be to make sure that the business stays afloat. But then you've got less people transacting, so it's impacting the whole market. So less people buying, less landlords, less work for PMs, less rents for tenants.
Yeah.
And the one that stays on the market, the rents are increasing. So tenants will bear the bulk, of the whole fall down of the industry.
I think it's going to be interesting because you've had this swathe of last minute, buyers agents and buyers trying to get in before the changes to SMSF. Now, I'm going to quote Phil Tarrant, who has a very significant voice in terms of real estate. He thinks there's going to be all sorts of trouble where there's been this scramble to buy anything through SMSFs.
Yeah.
Liam, what's your take on that?
Yeah, Phil and I were actually talking about that on a property buzz the other week, and it came off the back because Phil and I our offices are quite close to each other on different levels, but and I was doing a podcast with a very big BA, and I said to him when Phil was there, I said to him, how's business looking at the moment? Expecting, it's down 10%, down 20%. He's like, I've never been busier. What do you mean you've never been busier? It's like, well, it's all the SMSF deals. We're clearing through 10, 30, 40 deals a week. And this is someone who, I don't want to say like first, second, third tier, but smaller, on the smaller end, had only really been transacting, and brilliant mind, by the way, but only been in the industry for say 2 to 3 years. So he doesn't have the thousands and thousands and thousands of clients that some of the larger operators have. And you do kind of back of envelope maths and of what was essentially people bum rushing the market, right? Thousands of people that have rushed because it was this arbitrary deadline.
Buying anything.
Yeah.
Buying anything. And so what you've got on one point is suboptimal purchasing. Now, we've already seen this in the buyer's agency space for years of suboptimal purchasing, and this notion of the market will do the heavy lifting. Well, what happens when the market doesn't do the heavy lifting and you've been left, like you said before, Alex, over-leveraged, and these promised rental returns aren't necessarily forthcoming? I've dropped rent on 2 places, right? So, the market isn't necessarily exactly what's happening in the headlines. This is really important
because you kind of get you get these kind of like, rent's going to go up, but they're not going up at the moment, and not everywhere.
And it's not scientific. You can't just assume that, NAB says 30%, so therefore I look at my portfolio and add 30%. Or those will be in areas where the economics dictate that there is more demand than supply. But with this arbitrary August 10 deadline, it means that, look, I think for August and September, prices are going to have to temper because when I think Emilie, was AFIA or AIFA, the financial brokers, they came out saying that the Treasury undercooked the amount of SMSF loans that were going out. They said that there were 4,000, but there were 16,000 in the last financial year. Now, if there were 16,000 in the last financial year, how many thousands do you think happened in the last 8 weeks?
Yeah.
You had an artificial surge of demand in the market, which now, as of 7-8 days ago, I can't do the maths that quick, but just doesn't exist anymore. By necessity, I think that August and September will see listings go on longer. I think that you'll see buyers have more power to negotiate. And I think vendors, they're going to, especially in that area of the market where people were using their SMSF, they're just not going to have the demand that they did 2 weeks ago.
It's going to be interesting. We'll take a quick break there, guys. We'll be back in a couple of seconds.
Well, g'day everyone. It's Liam here. Now, if you're starting to feel a little bit overwhelmed with your compliance to-do list and a little bit irritated with everything that's coming through the pipeline to make sure that you are compliant, well, I have a solution for you. It's Visible, VISIBL, an end-to-end compliance platform that's been built specifically for Aussie real estate. Visible makes it simple to get your agency compliant. So whether it's minimizing the paperwork headache or handling AUSTRAC enrollment, risk assessment and policy, customer verifications, team training, and more. It's a platform built for the industry and built to actually make compliance simple. Check out Visible at visibl.com.au.
Welcome back. Alex, Emilie, Liam with you. I'm just going to pick up on where we left off at the end of the first session, because we're talking a lot about the surge to buy properties through SMSF, driven largely by buyer's agent, but also by demand, by Australians that don't want to miss out on that opportunity, which has been taken away from them. Very, very gravely wrong, in my opinion. But look, that's the policy. Why is this relevant to our audience? Well, you're going to end up picking up these properties as a property manager, the vast bulk of them. And there's going to be some managing that's going to have to be done, managing of expectations. You've got buyers that have bought anything, right? Not measured buying, because they're going, I want to buy an SMSF. What is available now? By default, some of those purchases are going to be good, of course, but there's going to be a lot where anything will do. And that's great in the heat of the moment where you're trying to surge to get it packaged up in your SMSF. But then when it goes out and you're going to put a tenant in there, it's going to be managed, there are going to be some uncomfortable truths that have to be dealt with. One of them is the rental going to stack up? How desirable is it going to be? Liam, you mentioned the first part, on properties that you own, you've had to drop the rent recently. So the industry is going to need to be ready to deal with this. And this is an opportunity, again, to think about the kind of conversations that you have with your owners. This is a point for honesty and real transparency, because if you shirk what you can see in terms of the purchase, and if you don't have that conversation with the owners, and they may have been told all sorts by a buyer's agent, I think you're going to need to address it. Otherwise, there's going to be some very disappointed people, and they're going to blame the PM. They don't blame the buyer's agent when it doesn't turn out to be what they thought. They blame the PM, who's now really their only asset and helping them manage it.
And I'll tell you, I think it's very easy. And the so what for your listeners, Alex, is I think it is easy to win people over. And speaking from experience, our last purchase was the deal that we got. It was several months before the election, so it wasn't really impacted by the May deadline.
What did you buy?
But it was 311 in Melton. Oh, it was appalling. It was absolutely appalling. But man, our PM, every step along the way, so communicative, so da-da-da-da-da. Now, the challenge with that property in particular was that the CMA, the rental comparison for the market was way off. They probably overcooked to buy at $30, $40, which actually, when you're already buying in a city, a semi-regional market, with a high 3% yield, it's actually quite important.
Yeah.
That differential is actually quite large.
It's critical, because at the end of the day, looking at the flip side, and in another life, my broking, we run a mortgage broking business. I worked in mortgage broking media for decades. The serviceability of the loan is critical. It's not just the investment. It's if you're servicing a loan and you're $30, $40 light per week, that's
stacks
gonna
up.
hurt.
It stacks up.
It stacks up.
And it's going to do the maths if you go and try and get lending again down the line. Now, it ended up also being untenanted. And Emilie knows the story. I rant about it very often. But it ended up being untenanted for several months. And there was this big finger pointing, because I said to the buyer's agent, I'm like, and this is where greed comes in. You as an investor, you have to look for yourself. Don't blindly trust these people. But, I look, and there are homes on the same street that were for rent, brand new, renovated for $20 less. And I'm, oh my gosh, no wonder it's been untenanted for so long. And the buyer's agent was going after the PM. They're useless. I'm like, mate, I'm not an idiot. I can see realestate.com.au right in front of me. Like, you've overcooked this.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we can tell you they're not doing it right. I'm like, mate, the fact, if they're standing there for 30 minutes on a Saturday and not one person walks in, the photos are fine. I approved the copy because they said, oh, just so you know, this is your advertising. Are you happy with it? Read well. I don't understand what else they can do, especially when they've got superior products for less, But there was a shifting of that blame from the BA to the PM. But what ultimately, as an investor, where I really built a great working relationship with the PM was because mate, they kept me up to date every step along the way. Every Saturday they would, I think it was just via email. I don't know if it was text, but they say, hey, Liam, just so you know, unfortunately 0 people came through today. However, this is what we're looking to do. We'll continue the campaign. It took all of maybe 14 days for my loyalty to shift super quickly. And when the BA said, change your PM, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it's not their fault for the leasing agent that they've been standing there 30 minutes every week. And those are the properties that we had to drop. Well, one of them that we had to drop the rent on. But
it's got to do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do. It's the market, and it was a suboptimal asset. But it was that communication, taking on the journey, the regular updates that took. But that was where my loyalty lay.
It's going to be critical moving forward. Emilie, what are you seeing? In your contact through both channels, through REB and through SPI and through Property Buzz, what are the recurring themes that are coming through to you at the moment?
In terms of PMs?
In terms of the market anything. In general. Look, I'm really looking at, for this audience, it is for PMs, but the the whole ecosystem matters. Buyers, renters, what's selling, availability, because it all feeds back in.
I think what we are seeing, from the conversations I have, on REB, especially at the moment, is that people are reconsidering more their PM branch, and they're starting to understand that they've got to work more hand in hand together, PMs and sales, just to feed the business, in a holistic way, especially now that the market is a little bit slower. So this is one part of things that we are seeing.
Such a good observation.
And look, I think it's easy to say, but less easy to put in practice from time to time. And I think now they are starting to reconsider this and look at in more as a one group rather than two separate branches.
One of the problems is quite often that, or realities, is that you have a sales agent that sets up an office and they know sales, and so then they will keep, because they don't understand PM, they keep PM and sales separate. I've never worked in the industry, but through speaking to, visionary next-gen organizations and professionals, the capacity for both sales and property management to work together and grow a business a lot faster is just mind-blowing.
Yeah, no, and I think, once you get to the rhythm to work together, it's I don't want to say easy, because nothing is never really easy, but, you've got a property manager that has a landlord, that landlord wants to buy something else, refers to the sale, they buy something back to the property manager, and it just feeds the ecosystem.
I'll give you a case in point. So I was going to, and so I've told the story before, but I was going to place a property with my PM. I didn't buy that property because the PM said, I think you can do better. He referred me then straight away. He knew that the sales agent had a property that he was selling, and I purchased that property immediately. So, and that property was also on the rent roll. So the owner was fatigued, had been on the rent roll for a long time. The rental, and the first thing I said to the selling agent, I said, this is giving a 7.8% yield. Why on earth is the owner selling it? And he said, they've had it for 11 years, bought off the plan, and they are fatigued because it has not gone up in value, right? So that's a classic case of a property manager connecting immediately with a sales agent. And guess what happens? There's two benefits for that agency. One, they keep the property on the rent roll. That's a win. Secondly, the sales agent gets a sale commission. That's very, very smart business.
I wonder, I don't know if this is something that you've spoken about on this podcast, Alex, or if anyone listening actually has the answer to this, but it'd be interesting to see how to use your tenants as a property manager and the property management side of your arm as a not a prospect, well, as a prospecting tool for buyers. Because one thing that Emilie and I think you and I are not fatigued about hearing about it, but it's something that we hear about, a dozen times a day, right? Which is, I think listings nationally are up 22%. I think was the latest figure. Now, obviously, the Australian property market's not one market. There are some areas where you can't walk 10 meters without seeing a listing board. There are some areas where it's almost business as usual. But across Australia, listings are up. So with that, what we ultimately see is that buyers aren't coming to the table. Days on market are going up. Buyers aren't there because of confidence. People's interest in buying property is down. We see that with the mortgage applications down 17% on last year. So people's appetite isn't there. Now there's $250 billion sitting in offsets right across Australia. So it's not like there's a lack of capital, but there is a lack of willingness. So you have to find your buyers. And what's going to separate a good selling agent from a bad selling agent is if you were, like we highlighted before, one of those people in property that the market lifts all ships and let the market do the heavy lifting, let the market bring 7 or 8 bidders to my auction. Well, you probably will be found out. Those people that are prospected and built a database, not of potential vendors, but of potential buyers, well, they're the ones that are going to be able to move their stock quicker and actually protect their GCI. So I don't know if it's something that we discuss on this podcast or if any of our listeners even want to reach out and give some stories about how you've been able to find a buyer from your rent roll.
Totally.
Because but I'm not hearing, are you hearing, I'm not hearing about people doing it effectively.
I read a story not that long ago on one buyer in Melbourne that was a tenant. And she heard that the property was going to go into sale. And she was like, I want to buy it because I love living here and I don't want to have to find another rental. Yeah. So
there is appetite.
There is appetite for tenants. And look, just quickly, because I want to give some data there. So there's a survey that just came through from NABE about real estate growth across the business. The growth standout opportunities for real estate business at 68% is residential sale, at 64% is property managing and leasing. So property management is definitely starting to get the recognition I think it deserves, Yeah,
NAB's been pushing that hard recently to something that you've been speaking about, Alex, for years, which is treating it as the engine room that it rightly is. In terms of the VAL side of the business, when the sales arm's going down, if you're looking to finance against your small business, if you're an agency owner, it's the PM.
But as you said, it should be the hub of any successful and forward-thinking agency because it's a constant and it should be an appreciating asset. You should be able to grow your rent roll organically or by acquisition. Some phenomenal stories from people I get a chance to speak to that are just growing hugely through acquisition and have got it down to a fine art to analyze, the investment. But you've got this, reoccurring revenue from your rent roll, but you have people in there, as you say, you've got your tenants in there that can be converted into buyers. You've got owners that will buy more property sitting there within your rent roll, but you've also got customers on both sides. This is a very unique thing where, looking to build your brand, if you provide good service to your tenants and to your owners, you can build up your reviews, you can build up your credibility, you can really push your brand out there through not just going on about great service, but people read reviews. It's how most people decide where they're going to go.
And on this point, Alex, it's a make or break, I want to say. So I was speaking with Barry Plan CEO Lisa Pennell, which you can go and listen on REB.
Plug,
Real Estate Exposed, little plug. And she's a tenant. And she was telling us on the pod that the agency who she didn't name, but she's a tenant with, is doing such a bad job as a PM that she doesn't want to go and buy or sell from them. So it's when you're doing it right, the branding that you push, the image of the whole network or the whole company is actually really good. But if you're doing it wrong, you can damage your brand as well.
There's and this isn't giving any anything closed away, anything off the record away, because we spoke about it at one of our events. I think it was the New Agent Academy a few months ago. But we had Grant McKay from New Management. He came up on stage and he and I did a fireside chat in Sydney because we're getting people interested in property management just as a potential career path. And he said that because he operates out of Sydney's eastern suburbs and he does a good job with his people. I think you work with him as well. But he said that he doesn't really have a sales side of the business, but he gets referrals.
No.
Yeah, he gets referrals from other agencies in the area from their salespeople because their salespeople have so little faith in their property management. And we can talk about, for whatever reason, like Emilie's point, it's overlooked.
So again, different side of the coin, but Ashby Farrell over in WA, he was a selling agent and he refused to refer his customers to the property management side of the busy work because it was so poor. Yeah. So he set up, but he's PM-focused sales agent. Yes, he still sells, but he goes and does open homes. He goes and meets tenants. He wants everyone in his ecosystem to have the same experience. Tenants, and owners. You know, so there is a new way of
Over
thinking.
at White Arch, they got great
Yeah, White
branding.
Arch.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
nice
Yeah,
design.
it is.
Yeah.
Just with Grant though, and just talking about rent. So I bought a place recently. It's just going on the market, and Grant said we'll put it on for $13.50. And I went, okay, look, we'll have a go. He's had several groups through, and he's gone, the appetite isn't there for $13.50. I think we drop it down. I went, look, I'll take your guidance. The marketplace. And, it's he will bring, so we're not going to go and put it on what he'd initially thought, because he's going to make an estimate of what he thinks the rental value of the property is. But if people don't turn up and take it, then it isn't worth what it's on. So you've got to have your finger on the pulse of appetite from tenants of what it's going to rent.
But I think it's also, I think you could, for me, PMs is a hard job because you are the middle person. You got to please your landlords, but you also have to deal with the tenants. You're maybe in some companies underappreciated for the work you do. I think it's a really hard job and they don't get enough credits. But with the companies that really look after their PMs, you've got a better retention. And then I think it's also all about educating people and the landlords. The number of time is like when you're buying something and something is wrong and you're going at the person on the other side of the phone. They're just the middlemen, The landlords need to also learn to listen to their PMs.
You got to educate them. And look, this is I'm like a stuck record on this. Leadership comes from the top. If you deal with a PM that isn't very good, the chances are they're working in an organisation that doesn't value PM. That's the likelihood. Leadership and culture comes from the top. If you run a business where PMs are a kind of a poor second cousin to the sales agents, you're going to end up with a particular type of experience for your customers. You have to, we as customers, we understand the value of PMs. You have to build a business around that proposition with people that are valued in the organization. It's still a tough job, but you know what? It feels a lot tougher when nobody values what you do. And there are some people working in PM that shouldn't be working in PM. Let's be really crystal clear. I'm not going to play a violin for absolutely every single PM out there. There are some that shouldn't be in it. But there's a lot that are working hard. Some get great value from their principals. Others don't. We'll take a quick break there. I want to talk about in our last section an upcoming report that you've got. So we'll dive into that in a moment. Welcome back. Great to have you with us. This is a bit of a busman's holiday here. I've got journalists who I love talking to.
A busman's holiday?
Yeah.
What's that?
Busman's, you never heard of that?
Do you know this?
Don't ask the foreigner.
Well, I don't know. I thought sometimes idioms cross language.
I'll go into it later. It's like a kind of an in-house kind of conversation.
Okay.
So this is a great thing. It's such a privilege to work with journalists. I'm a frustrated journalist. I want to be a journalist, but I wasn't good enough, so they made me a salesman years ago. But I love chance to catch up with my friends, colleagues, but I just do like journos. They just bring an extra dimension to every conversation. Liam, I want to dive into a report that you're running coming up. We've done this. We did this last year. It's the future of property management payments, changing radically. It's an evolving, moving area of property management. We know the legislative situation that PMs are, if they're going to handle trust money, they need a trust account. But there are increasing now platforms and options where there's no trust money, so there's no need for a trust account. There's a building. You've just completed a very comprehensive survey across hundreds of agents. But we're not going to go into the findings of that because that's not the purpose of this podcast. But it is a moving landscape. The attitudes and expectations are changing fairly quickly.
I'll just as a quick précis, because obviously we want people to go and download the report. So
yes,
we'll probably do a podcast when that's out, because it gives an insight and a glimpse into ultimately what property managers and agency owners, principals need from their day-to-day. So looking at this, there's a broad acceptance that, okay, maybe the status quo isn't really working. Okay, I understand the status quo is not really working. Now to move away from trust accounts is going to be a bit of a headache, but oh my gosh, I'm going to have to rip this Band-Aid at some point. That's the rough.
Do you know what? I know that the findings are consistent with the first year, that most people say, or as a large percentage of agents say, if I was to start tomorrow, I wouldn't use a trust account.
Yes.
I think ripping the Band-Aid off, because trust accounts functionally work. So it's not a matter of going, they don't work, they're broken, so I've got to stop using them. And I think this is one of the interesting drivers of shaping the payments landscape. So you're increasingly seeing new to market agents, often sales agents, who will, they need a trust account for the sales side of the business, but for property management, they no longer have to use a trust account if they don't create trust money, i.e. there's a direct end-to-end payment. What I've seen over the last, I'd say probably over the last 8 years, is the marketplace is falling into a number of distinct categories. Okay. Trust accounting, which is the mainstay. Most agencies run property management trust accounts. You've got another model which has been around for some time, which is outsourced trust accounting. So I don't do it in-house, but I get somebody else to do it for me. The third model is a hybrid, and this is all driven by the tech providers, you can outsource your trust account to us, or we do some automation of payments. You can choose which one you want to go. And the final model is just automated payments. So it's interesting, from going from being one linear way of receipting and reconciling funds, which is via a trust account, you've now got a number of different channels. And the survey shows there is growing awareness. There's I won't disclose the numbers, but a high percentage of agents are now aware of the fact that there are alternatives to trust accounts. But there's still definitely a lot of confusion as to what those alternatives are. I work in the business of payments, so I understand crystal clear all of the different avenues. I understand the complexities and eases around them. I am interested to know, particularly around the outsourced trust accounting, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit, Emilie, because you've been dealing with this on the other side of real estate, which is sales. There's two sides to this. One of them is it legitimate? Well, if you've got a real estate license and if you set up your trust account legitimately, yes, of course, you can transact. There's no problem with that. What I'm interested in around the outsourced trust accounting, particularly in the hybrid models, is what is the disclosure to landlords? So if you're my real estate agent and you're using a trust account and you're collecting my rent from Emilie the renter, and that's why I've engaged with you, and then midway through you've decided you're now going to outsource your trust accounting, and you don't tell me, whilst the outsourced trust accounting operation, I'm sure, is fully compliant and legitimate, with you as the agent that's chosen to outsource it, what disclosure is required for your customer? And I'd be interested. Look, we're not going to answer it now, and it may not be answered in REB. I think that's a topic of debate for the industry to look into. I'm going to turn over to you, Emilie, because I know that you've been writing some really, really groundbreaking stories on the sales side, and there's some very interesting developments on that side around outsourcing trust accounts.
Yeah, look, there's multiple things happening there. So look, we've seen, I don't know if it's an increase, but we've seen multiple across Australia theft, unfortunately.
That goes on
trust
all
accounts,
day, every day.
Which, brings back to your point, like, if we have no trust account, can theft happen? But we've also seen issues around third-party trust account holdings.
Yeah.
And so there's been a New South Wales landmark court case that was going on, like, I think last week. And it's a little bit of a tricky one, this one, because it's from a law firm that was accused of allegedly doing deposit flicking. They've been cleared by the court, but it actually opens the debate. And that was on settlement money.
Yeah.
So it's just opening the debate again on whether or not, third account trust party should happen, and what's the legality behind it, and how do we regulate that? And I think there's a lot going on around, where the interests are going. And that's one of the issues we've been seeing is, like, depending on which state you are, like, the third parties are more or less acceptable. And it's also because some of the interests that are going on the holding, they're going through that government fund that is there if theft happens. But if you don't have trusts, can theft happen? That's the question.
I think that's going to depend. I wouldn't say clear cut. If you don't have trust, can theft happen? Absolutely, it can do, because it depends on how money is transacted. If you have end to end, linear sort of payment gateway, no, theft can't happen. But there are other channels where, look, I don't know. The reality is with trust accounting, trust accounting is what is the mainstay, because that's how the industry has evolved over 100 years, and it's regulated and it's very tangible. But the proposition is, at the end of the day, that if I'm entrusting somebody to manage a property on my behalf, I'm entrusting them to collect rent. That's a big part of the proposition. Sure, yes, they're going to maintain the property. Yes, they're going to find a tenant. Yes, they're going to make sure it's compliant. But a large proportion of that is that they are collecting rent. If I'm going to, if they're using a trust account, and they're going to deliver that rent to me. And so I think that I'm very interested in the fundamental. When I trust you to collect money for me, and if you outsource that to somebody else and you don't disclose, I think that's an issue.
I think that was where the legality arose in the recent court findings, that in this specific case,
there was disclosure.
Because
Yes.
there was disclosure from essentially the point of sale, I guess is the point, the simplest way. They weren't engaged in deposit flicking, quote unquote.
And I know that in the set, but I'm interested in this growing trend in property management. If the agencies that are outsourcing, are they disclosing to their owners?
And to add a layer of complexity, it didn't necessarily mean that just because it was disclosed that it was still legal. So they were found not essentially not uncompliant because they were very upfront with it, though it's still evolving as to whether the outsourcing of it was still okay. So that's been deferred onto New South Wales Fair Trading. Using this, obviously this isn't legal advice and we're not legal professionals, but what one would glean from this is that if you were to collect settlement money and put it into a trust account that you did not have oversight or management of, and you didn't declare it, then yes, you would be breaking the law.
On that basis, on that linear,
it's not outside the realm.
But
of
I wonder
to say yes.
how that works with rent. So look, I think, guys, everyone tuning in, the report that Liam and Emilie are going to put together is essential reading. It really does. It just shows, it just maps the attitudes and the perceptions of the industry. And in line with that, there are providers that are looking to meet those needs, Manage being one of them. And we know all the other tech platforms. The market is changing. The days of just operating a trust account within an agency have changed.
Can I add, Alex?
Yeah.
I think the one big takeaway from this regarding outsourced trust accounting, the big takeaway is it is not simple. It is not as simple as people think, that you can just defer liabilities or responsibilities of compliance. That is the simplest way, because you've had some of the finest legal minds in New South Wales come together and essentially come to an impasse on the legality of it. And despite some of the finest legal minds in New South Wales going through it and fighting what was ultimately a very public case, Emilie and I were getting contacted by both sides, people going after each other on LinkedIn. We had phone calls about this because, two sides of the camp were coming in, people that supported it, people that were against it, and everyone was throwing in. It was so high profile. And despite all of that, the justice, one of the judges basically said, hey, at least you were upfront about it, but anything beyond that, I'm deferring to the New South Wales government. It's not simple.
I want to add, it's not simple and it's still ongoing.
And
I spoke to Fair Trading. They're aware of the concern and they are in consultation at the moment with industry. And I've spoken to industry speak bodies as well. And what they're telling us is that they're not against it as long as it is regulated.
And this is the issue. This is how things change. You get innovation and then legislation catches up.
Basically.
And it's part and parcel of the way that things move forward. But it's, as an agent, when you are the custodian of your customers' money, you've got to be really conscious of your level of disclosure and transparency with your customers. You know, whether I think having choice as an agent as to how I deal with payments is critical. I think legislating and being forced to use one particular channel. A growing number of agents don't want to use a trust account. Now, some of them because they don't like doing the reconciliations, some of them because it's extremely stressful, some of them because of the really tarnished reputation around the constant thefts, and only a few of them get reported. I can tell you, you know,
100%.
it's.
I mean, even the ones that do get reported on, you know, Em and I, she's the one that does all the work, right? But you know, we get tipped off like weekly, and that's the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, that's the stuff that typically, and I'm not sure if Em would agree with this, you know, feel free to jump in, but typically this is the stuff that gets reported on because the musical chairs are stopped. You know, you go, you're looking to sell the agency and you're doing an audit, and then suddenly you look through the audit, like you're down $500K. Yeah. But because you've got so many properties under management, you just kind of, the cycle's going through and it's being washed through with money, so no one really knows how far behind they are. And it's only when they go to wrap up a business, sell the rent roll, that the musical chair stopped, and you realize that, wow, we're down $500K, we're a chair worth $500K short, and then someone's going to lose out, which at the end of the day is typically going to be the landlords. This is just the stuff that we find out about. How many existing rent rolls are there from businesses that have been out there 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years that we still have to find out about because it just keeps getting topped up?
I assume, and I don't know about the compliance around it because I've never been involved in managing a trust account. I believe that they're audited every year.
They are. They are, yeah. So, but I mean, some of these cases that we have, and sorry to cut you off, some of them go back years. Oh yeah, so you're right. They do get audited every year, but they're still coming through. So,
but I know that. Sorry, but even without theft, I know from agents if they can't balance because there's been an error, like an accounting error, no theft, no nothing. Talking, you know, dollars, not tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, just dollars. They've got to go back and work out. You've got to balance the books. It has to be balanced because you end up in an audit nightmare.
So two things there. Like one thing is like we've lived it with my fiance. We got money back from one of the rental property, like maybe 5 years later. Really? They gave us back like I can't remember if it was $500 that we overpaid because they had an audit. And like they came back and they're like, oh,
and they'll be panicking. They'll be going, "Where's this $500 come from?"
Yeah, and so they gave it to us back. And the second is yes, businesses are audited. To give you an idea, last week, so that was 3 days ago. New South Wales Fair Trading finished a massive audit statewide and then had $200,000 in fine, with 34 businesses facing potential license suspension, 41 overdue audit lodged, 32 warnings, 3 industry bans, and 6 mandatory training orders. So it's not because that you are audited that the agencies are doing the right thing and put the audits on time or the way they should be. Yeah. So there's still like a lot of the compliance that needs to be pushed forward, and I think there's a big need for training there.
You know, the real estate agents that I deal with are very compliance conscious. You know, they are really sensitive around the whole collection of rent and distribution of funds and then also reconciliations. This is going to be an ongoing topic, and we're in an industry where they're not going to suddenly wade in and take immediate avenues, but I think there's a genuine, what's coming through from this report, there's genuine building awareness and curiosity and realization that there are better, more effective ways to deal with that very important part of real estate. Look, read the report. You know, you'll get full details as to what all the different options are. Of course, you know, trust accounting.
Maybe we can do a special
is the mainstay. Maybe we can. Yep. Maybe we can. It'd be good to get. You know, what would be good? It'd be good to get an agent that doesn't use a trust account. I can put forward one of managed customers. You know, we've got customers who've been doing direct automated transfer of funds for, you know, some of them for 8 years. So they can tell you exactly what the reality is of, you know, the day to day from a transactions point of view. But Guys, thank you for coming on.
Thank you
Thanks,
for having
Alex.
us.
We could carry this conversation on, but I know.
No, I know.
You got a queue of people out the door waiting to do other podcasts with you.
Unfortunately, true.
Celebrity.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's
He's too
the
famous.
property podcasting world. Am I right? Yeah.
Guys, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Alex.
For everyone
Thanks for
else,
having us.
thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to check out all the other podcasts, and we'll catch you next week.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.